On March 7, 2025, just after the morning rush, a retired school teacher named Margaret pulled her 4-year-old sport utility vehicle into my shop with a worried look on her face. She had just come from a national chain tire store where a technician had inflated all 4 of her tires to exactly 32 pounds per square inch, the same number he had been quoting since she was raising her children. Her ride felt strange. Her fuel economy had dropped. And something deep down told her the car did not feel the way it used to. Today, I am exposing why that one number, 32 pounds per square inch, has been costing drivers over the age of $55,000 in worn tires, bad mileage, and even preventable accidents, and why nearly every tire shop in America still repeats it like a law. I have seen this scene more times than I can count. A senior driver walks into a tire shop, trusting the person behind the counter. They do not argue. They do not question. They grew up in an era when mechanics were craftsmen, and a handshake meant something. So when the technician says, "I set them to 32 pounds per square inch," they nod, they pay, and they drive off, assuming everything is correct. Margaret was no different. She had been driving for nearly 50 years. She had bought tires from the same chain since 1987. And she had never once questioned the number 32 because nobody had ever given her a reason to. But here is the uncomfortable truth. The number 32 pounds per square inch is not a standard. It is not a law. It is not printed anywhere in your owner's manual. It is a leftover habit from the 1970s and the 1980s, back when bias-ply tires ruled the road and most passenger cars weighed far less than what seniors drive today. That number has stuck around for 40 years, not because it is right, but because it is easy. It is what gets repeated at training seminars, whispered between shop technicians, and stamped into the muscle memory of every person holding an air hose. And it is quietly destroying tires, burning fuel, and putting older drivers at risk every single day. I have been inside this industry long enough to say it plainly. The pressure your tires actually need has nothing to do with the number 32. It has everything to do with a small sticker that most seniors have never seen, placed in a spot most shops ignore, on a vehicle engineered with tolerances most technicians no longer bother to read. When I walked Margaret out to her SUV, I opened the driver's door and showed her the placard glued to the door jamb. She leaned in, squinted, and read the number out loud. 35 PSI front, 33 PSI rear. Her tires had been set to 32 across all 4 corners. That meant her front tires were 3 pounds underinflated and her rear tires were off by 1. On paper, that sounds harmless. In reality, it is the reason her steering felt vague. Her fuel economy had dropped nearly 9%, and her front tires were wearing on the outer edges 14 months earlier than they should have. This is where most drivers, especially seniors, get blindsided. Modern vehicles are not designed around a universal pressure. They are engineered around very specific load ratings, suspension geometry, tire compound behavior, and braking dynamics. Your car's manufacturer spent millions of dollars calculating the exact pressure that balances ride comfort, stopping distance, cornering stability, tread life, and fuel economy. That number is printed on the door jamb sticker, sometimes on the fuel door, and always in the owner's manual. It is never, under any circumstance, printed on the side of the tire itself. This is where the biggest lie in the tire industry lives. Look at the sidewall of any tire. You will see something like max press 44 PSI or max press 51 PSI. Most drivers and far too many shop technicians read that number and assume it is the target. It is not. That number is the maximum pressure the tire can safely hold at its maximum load, not the pressure your vehicle needs. Using that number is like filling a coffee cup to the brim, just because it can physically hold that much. The 32 PSI default was invented as a compromise, a safe middle ground between underinflation and that maximum. It was meant to keep shops from overfilling tires back when air gauges were less accurate and tires were less engineered. It was never meant to be the correct pressure for your specific car, but 40 years later, it is still being treated like gospel. Now here is why this matters more for seniors than anyone else. As drivers age, reaction time slows slightly, night vision dims, grip strength decreases, small changes in how a vehicle behaves on the road become harder to detect and harder to correct. Underinflated tires lengthen stopping distance. At 60 miles per hour, a tire set 6 PSI below specification can add nearly 10 feet to your braking distance on dry pavement, and much more on wet. That is the length of an entire crosswalk. That is the difference between stopping safely and clipping the vehicle in front of you. For a driver in their 70s or 80s, that margin is not a statistic. It is survival, and it goes deeper. Underinflated tires generate heat. Heat is the single greatest enemy of a tire's internal structure. The rubber flexes more, the sidewalls work harder, and the internal belts begin to fatigue. At highway speeds in summer, an underinflated tire can reach internal temperatures that quietly weaken the cords holding it together. Months later, on a long road trip, that weakened tire can fail. Not because it was punctured, not because it was old, but because it was run at 32 PS1 when it needed 36 PSI. Seniors on long drives to visit grandchildren are statistically the most common victims of heat-related tire blowouts, and almost every one of those blowouts traces back to pressure that was set by someone who never looked at the door jamb. Margaret's story is not unusual. Over the last decade, I have examined hundreds of tires from drivers over 55, and the pattern is almost identical. Premature outer edge wear on the front tires, slightly cupped rear tires, and fuel economy that has quietly dropped by 5 to 12% compared to the first year of ownership. Every one of those vehicles had been serviced regularly. Every one of those vehicles had been rotated on schedule. And every one of those vehicles had been inflated to 32 PS1, regardless of what the manufacturer actually recommended. This is not an accident. This is a system. The shop that inflates every vehicle to 32 PSY is not being malicious. Most technicians are simply doing what they were taught. It is faster, it is uniform, and it keeps the air compressors set to one number. Managers like it because it reduces the chance of overinflation complaints. Technicians like it because they do not need to check the door jamb on every car. Corporate training materials often reinforce it as a default. The result is a nationwide habit that has quietly become the norm, and the people paying for it are the ones least likely to challenge it. Seniors, retirees, and trusting long-time customers. Here is what makes this worse. The tire pressure monitoring system in your car will not save you from this mistake. That warning light is calibrated to turn on when a tire drops about 25% below the recommended pressure. On a vehicle that calls for 36 PSI, that light will not come on until the tire is down to roughly 27 PSI. Which means a tire sitting at 32 PSI on a car that needs 36 PSI is invisible to the system. It looks fine, it feels fine, it drives fine, but it is slowly eating your tread, sipping extra fuel from your tank, and adding feet to your emergency stopping distance. The warning light was never designed to catch small underinflation. It was designed to catch catastrophic underinflation. The space between those two is where most of the damage quietly happens. Now let me tell you what I did for Margaret, because this is where everything changes. I walked her through the door jamb sticker. I explained what each number meant. I showed her that her specific vehicle, a mid-size crossover loaded with the weight of her groceries, her grandchildren's car seats, and occasional road trip luggage, needed 35 PSI in the front and 33 PSI in the rear. Not 32, not 36, not whatever number a technician felt like typing into his tablet. I inflated each tire to the exact spec, cold, with a high-quality digital gauge, not the old dial gauge most shops still use. Within 2 weeks, she called me to say her steering felt sharper, her ride felt calmer, and her fuel mileage had climbed back up by nearly 4 miles per gallon on her regular route to the grocery store. That is not a placebo. That is physics finally working the way the engineers intended. Now here is what every senior driver, and honestly every driver, should know going forward. Always check your pressure cold. That means before you drive, or at least 3 hours after the vehicle has been parked. Tires heat up during driving, and the pressure inside them rises by roughly 1 pound for every 10 degrees of temperature increase. A tire that reads 35 psi after a highway trip might only hold 31 psi cold, which means it is actually underinflated. Shops that check pressure on hot tires routinely get this wrong. The manufacturer's number on the door jamb always refers to cold pressure, measured before the tires have rolled a single mile that day. Always check all 4 tires, not just the one that looks low. Tires lose pressure naturally, about 1 to 2 pounds per month under normal conditions, and more when the weather turns cold. In fact, every 10-degree drop in outside temperature removes roughly 1 pound of pressure from each tire. This is why so many drivers see tire lights come on during the first cold snap of autumn. It is not the tires failing. It is physics reminding them that air contracts. Seniors who drive less often are especially vulnerable because tires lose pressure even when the car is parked. A vehicle sitting in a driveway for 2 weeks can easily drop 3 to 4 pounds across all 4 tires without the driver ever noticing. Buy a good digital gauge. A reliable handheld digital gauge costs less than $20 and is accurate to within a fraction of a pound. The pencil-style gauges from the 1970s are still floating around in glove boxes everywhere, and most of them are off by 2 to 4 pounds. That is enough error to completely undo everything I just explained. Keep the gauge in your glove box, check your tires on the first Sunday of every month, and compare the numbers to the door jamb sticker. That habit alone will add thousands of miles to your tires and meaningfully improve your safety on the road. And here is the part I want every senior driver to hear clearly. You are allowed to question the number. You are allowed to walk into a shop, hand them the exact pressure from your door jamb, and politely ask them to set your tires to that. You are not being difficult. You are not being paranoid. You are being informed. The technician behind the counter may have been trained on a 32 PSI default, but your vehicle was engineered by people who knew your exact car, your exact weight, your exact tire size, and your exact safety requirements. Their number is the right number, not his. I will leave you with this. Tires are the single most important safety component on any vehicle. They are the only part of your car that actually touches the road. Every function your car performs, steering, accelerating, braking, avoiding a sudden obstacle, depends on 4 small contact patches of rubber. When those contact patches are shaped correctly, at the correct pressure, everything works the way the engineers promised. When they are not, every other safety system is compromised, no matter how new or expensive the vehicle is. The number 32 PSI is not evil. It is just lazy. And for 40 years, that laziness has been quietly charging seniors more money, shortening tire life, and raising the risk of accidents that never needed to happen. You do not have to be a mechanic to protect yourself. You just need to open your driver's door, read the sticker, and trust the engineers who built your car over the technician who is paid to move you through the line quickly. If this video opened your eyes, hit like so more senior drivers see it. Subscribe if you want weekly breakdowns that give you confidence behind the wheel instead of confusion. If you have ever been told your tires were fine at 32 PSI when your door jamb clearly said otherwise, drop your story in the comments. Those stories matter because the most expensive mistake a driver can make is not the one that damages the car. It is the one that quietly erodes trust in your own instincts, and now you have the knowledge to trust them again.